It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Let's get out of here. Aye.
Hey everybody, it's Aaron from Got a Minute. We're looking for rapture patterns in the Bible. Remember, pattern is prophecy and prophecy is pattern. And so we see this thing going in the garden, and I got my oranges and my potatoes for illustration. Then I'm going to remove this this clipboard and show you some stuff. There's a lot of writing in there. I didn't want to show you it right away because there's so many words. The prayer in the garden, it's in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But I just want to highlight something here with these oranges and potatoes right away. So in Matthew and in Mark, the story is very similar. The details are very similar in Matthew and Mark. Luke is very different and John is very different. What you see in Matthew is we see Jesus praying 3 times. We have prayer number 1, prayer number 2, prayer number 3. We have a response from Jesus after the first time. The second time, he doesn't say anything to the disciples. He goes back and prays. And then after the third time, there's a response. So there's no response here. And what the pattern I think we see here in this garden is we see just like Jesus came the first time and died on the cross, we're waiting for a rapture and we're waiting for a second coming. And I think what he's doing here, the pattern that we see here is the bigger 2,000-year pattern. We see the death on the cross, and then there's a response to sleeping. We see the rapture, but he doesn't talk to the people that are sleeping because they're asleep. And then there's that second coming theme over here. So we're going to open her up now and see how we see these parallels. We're going to go through it a bit. So I'll remove these oranges, put them to the side, and these potatoes and put them to the side. And so we see the passages in Mark, or Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so in Matthew, I wanted to highlight some of these words. And he says to the disciples, particularly, he actually talks to Peter. He says, why are you sleeping? But the Greek word is Gregorio, and that means to keep awake or to watch. Well, there's so many scriptures that talk about watching and waiting, but sometimes when you see the word watch, really what it means is to keep awake. And then he mentions about them sleeping, and that's G2518, and that's kathudo, to sleep. And so what we'll do here is we'll just highlight the story. I think we'll just read through it. It's not too long, and then we'll get the idea here. This is Matthew 26, and let's go with that. And so it says here, then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch. In other words, stay awake with me. Stay awake. He went a little farther and fell on his face and praying, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but your will. So that's his first prayer. That's orange number 1. Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter in particular, what? Could you not watch with me? Whenever that word is watch, that's the G1127 word. And watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. And here's the second time. And he came and found them asleep again. That word sleep is kathudo, sleep. They're sleeping. For their eyes were, where are we? We're heavy, sorry. So he left them. But that word left is aphiemi. And he went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Well, aphiemi, watch therefore, this is Matthew 24, flip the page, right? Because it says one would be taken and the other left. One would be aphiemi. One would be paralambano, in like a marriage. and will be left, aphiemi. Well, this, which could be representing the rapture, those that are sleeping, he left. He left behind. No conversation with those guys. But you'll see in Luke and John, it's very different. And then, of course, he addresses them. He says, my betrayer is here. Judas is there. We know that in both Luke and John, Satan indwells Judas. So we got this idea where when at Jesus' second coming, he's going to put Satan in prison for 1,000 years, and so on. So we got a cool theme here, but we're focused more on this rapture theme of some are left behind, and he leaves the ones that are sleeping. How about that? That is so neat. So Mark has a very similar thing going on, and we have that same idea, the same theme. It's a very similar story, but instead of the word aphiemi, we have this word G5290. Okay, so we had the same word to keep awake, we had the same word to sleep, but we got this new word G5290, hypostephro, which means to come again and to return. So that's in Mark 14. And again, it won't take too long to read through it. So we'll do that, and here it is. And then they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took Peter, James, and John, this time it tells us the three that came with him, and he began to be troubled and deeply distressed. And then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch. Gregorio. Or stay awake. He went a little farther and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Then he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter in particular, I've discussed how in the past I think Peter represents the left behind, and the beloved John represents the raptured group. But anyway, he says to Peter in particular, Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not watch 1 hour or stay awake? Watch and pray, or in other words, stay awake, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And a quick bounce over to Revelation 2 and 3. Be watchful, or in other words, stay awake, same Greek word. Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain. Stay awake, that are ready to die. For I have not found your works perfect before God. Remember, therefore, how you have received and heard. Hold fast and repent. Therefore, if you will not stay awake, I will come upon you as a thief, and you will not know what hour I come upon you. We will go back to Mark 14. Again, he went away and prayed and spoke the same words. And when he returned, we're waiting for Jesus to return, he found them asleep. For their eyes were heavy and they did not know what to answer him. But we already know in Matthew that he aphiemied them on this time, left them behind. Then he came the third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? It is enough. The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. So we have a very similar theme from Matthew to Mark. Now we're going to hop over to Luke, and we're going to see some big differences. The key words I want you to see here is the word temptation. Although we saw it before, in Luke, he doesn't even tell them to watch in this particular passage. How about that? He doesn't tell them to stay awake. Now, there's lots of teachings out there that say Luke is written to the bride, or written to a Greek audience. Matthew's written to a Jewish audience. And there's a theme that this is for the Jews, this is for the tribulation saints, and this is for the bride. Isn't it interesting that he talks to Peter here and Peter there? And in Luke, he doesn't tell him to watch. It's almost like he doesn't have to or something. So we're going to flip over to Luke and read through that. And what I will say, though, is before Luke 22, before the story of the parable, what does Luke 21 say? Watch, therefore. This is Luke 21:36. Watch, therefore. Now, there's a different Greek word. It's G69, ekrepuno, but it means the same thing. It means to stay awake. So stay awake, therefore, and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things. Okay, so you flip the page and you get over to the pair in the garden. But I want to just again highlight, we've got a temptation. We've got this word G32, anglios, which means an angel, a messenger comes to Jesus in the garden in Luke. How about that? We got the mention of the blood dripping in this story. How about that? We're saved by the blood. We're waiting for Jesus to come and have an angelic meeting with us, and we are only saved by the blood of Christ. We're only going to get raptured by the blood of Christ. We're going to escape temptation because of the blood of Christ. And he only says once he only talks about sleeping once, as opposed to over here, it's mentioned like many times. This is only mentioned once. So we'll go through that. And before I read that, let me go bounce over to Revelation 3, verse 10. Thinking about this word temptation, okay? Okay, the word temptation, Revelation 3:10, because you have kept my command to preserve, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell in it. But that word for trial is temptation. That's that same Greek word that I just presented. That Greek word, parissimos, keep you from the temptation. So, going back to Luke 22, now that we have that in context, temptation, coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives, we're in the Luke's Gospel now, as he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. When he came to the place, he said to them, pray, that you may not enter into temptation. Notice he doesn't say watch, he just says pray, as if they're already awake, in a way. And he said, and he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. We don't see this three-step prayer. It's a whole different scene here. And then an angel appeared. Whoa, what's going on here? How about that? An angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became great drops of blood falling down to the ground. When he rose up from prayer, he had come to his disciples. He found them sleeping from sorrow. Then he said to them, why do you sleep? There's your word, G2518. Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation. It's mentioned again. If you sleep, you might enter into temptation. But Revelation 3:10, I've kept you from the hour of temptation. We write the Church of Philadelphia. So sleeping is associated with temptation. Or in other words, sleeping is associated with the tribulation. And so there is all of that there too. And so the final thing here that I want to really highlight, this is so neat in John. And this is the words that I really want you to focus in on. This is fun. Hopefully you made it this long. John 18, garden, whole different scene. I want you to see that Jesus said, I am. This is really neat. You won't really discover this in any English translation. So this is so neat. So we're going to go to John 18. He doesn't even mention the times of prayer. John, the idea of John is he's trying to show how Jesus is God and his divinity and the power of Jesus. And so you can clearly see this in the difference in how he describes the story in John 18. Okay, so the word for I would be ego, G1473, and the word for eme would be G1510, and that's am. So I am. The English translations inserts the word he, but the Greek doesn't even say the word he. When we get there, I'll explain what I'm talking about. So this is John 18. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to him, whom are you seeking? Whoa. They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am. And the he is actually inserted by every English translation. So if you got the word he in it, that's not in the original Greek. I'll show you that. Actually, I'll show you that right now. Okay, so you could see this. I am, and I am. So there's not supposed to be a he in there. I am. Why is that so significant? Because God said, hey, Moses, my name is I am. I'll show you. This is Exodus 3. I am who I am. So again, Jesus is calling himself God in this moment. So I've taken the liberty to scratch out the word he. So Jesus said to them, I am. Wow, that would have been powerful. And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now, when he said to them, I am, they drew back and fell to the ground. Well, of course, Jesus is God. Then he asked them again, whom are you seeking? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way. I believe Jesus said this twice because Genesis 41:32 says, and the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice because the thing is established by God. If something is said twice, it is a thing established by God. So Jesus said, I am twice because it's established by God. I think. Anyway, verse 9. That the saying might be fulfilled, which he spoke, of those whom you gave me, I have lost none. And then on it goes. So what we see here, if you look at this chart, you see Jesus declaring that he's God in John. We see a bit of rapture stuff in here because in Luke, we see an angel showing up, an angelic encounter. His blood is dripping. He doesn't really tell him to watch. He says, pray. He's talking about temptation. It connects us with the Church of Philadelphia. If you're awake and you're watching and you're in Christ and you've got the blood of Christ on you, you can expect Jesus to show up and take us with him to the Father's house, which is spoken of in John 14. If you back up over here, we got a Jewish audience and maybe a Left Behind audience, both addressing Peter. Why are you sleeping? But again, we got three versions of prayer. The first time, God says, what's going on? The third time, the I am, Jesus says, what's going on? The second time, silent, because he was sleeping. And it says, he feared me. There was a leaving behind. There's a leaving behind in Matthew on that second time. So are you going to be on the paralambano, on the one taken in the form of marriage, right? Or are you going to be aphemi, forsaken, left behind? God's message is to stay awake and watch, and really the ultimate way to be prepared is by understanding that the blood of Christ saves you. That's what saves you. That's what gets you into this event. And we don't know exactly what day, but we're certainly going to speculate on the timing of these events. And so this, for me, is such a great theme of rapture and left behind, one taken, one left, that kind of idea. But how cool is it? The I am. Jesus said, I am. And there's even times when they said, hey, are you the king of the Jews? And he's like, yeah, I am. I am as you say, things like that. So even some other parts in the Bible that really seem to be a clever way of saying that he's God too. Anyway, guys, we are one day closer. I hope you enjoyed this. See you in the clouds. Go, Jesus, go, and adios, muchachos.